Okay, so first of all, I'm going to just apologize for all the sexist language because it's all king today. It's the Feast of Christ the King. It's all king. And you can't, I said to Cassie earlier, I can't find music that doesn't say king and lord and all that. It's just everywhere. Although I am a bit jealous of Jesus because he said this line, and I just loved it. I was born and I came into this world for one purpose, to bear witness to the truth. I thought to myself, man, I wish I could have the clarity of that in my life. I wish I knew exactly what I was born for. I mean, that's pretty darn clear, right? I came for one purpose, to bear witness to the truth. It's easy to remember. It's kind of catchy. Checks all the boxes, right? We got it. I wish my own life was like that. Unfortunately, it's not, and so I have to go through life and dig out and muddle and see what all happens. And that's okay. I'm convinced that that's a part of the journey of holiness. So today is the final Sunday of the liturgical year. And as I said, we have a problem. We have a problem of language. We have to understand there's always a historical and a cultural context to everything that happens, right? And this feast is no different. Actually, most of us would think that this feast has been around for a long time, the Feast of Christ the King. You really want to know what it's really called? It's called the Solemnity of our Lord Jesus Christ, King of the Universe. That's a big title for one day. I have to tell you, though, it wasn't always that. The last Sunday of the year wasn't always this title. The last Sunday of the year didn't always have these readings. And in fact, it's probably one of the newest liturgical celebrations in our calendar. It was established in 1925. So prior to that, this wasn't considered the Feast of Christ the King. This was the last Sunday of the year. In 1925, what was happening? Okay, you and I know a little bit of history, right? 1925, we've got Europe. It's kind of in a mess. We've got Italy really in a mess. Italy is now under the fascist leader of Mussolini, right? And Mussolini is kind of like tearing the country apart, and it's attacking the papal states, right? Remember, Italy was controlled by the papacy. It was controlled by the Pope, and Mussolini was like dismantling that whole thing and fighting against Rome, and Rome was like sometimes lovey-dovey with Mussolini and sometimes absolutely hating Mussolini, and all these political things were happening, and it was back and forth, and even the Pope was talking to Hitler in Nazi Germany and looking at what was happening there, and all of these things were happening. And we got finally to 1929. 1929 is when we had the Lateran Treaty. The Lateran Treaty finally said, the Pope finally said, okay, you get Italy to Mussolini. You get Italy, I get the Vatican. Okay? So you got King Victor Emmanuel II. He was the one who, he was the king of Italy at that point. At that point of the signing of the, and Pope Pius XI, and I just shared this with Cassie a little earlier. They didn't call him the king of the Vatican. They called him the sovereign. Well, I said if it acts like a duck and it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's probably a duck. So king, sovereign, probably the same thing, right? But we just call it a different name. But the fact is 1925, see, all this stuff is happening before 29. All this stuff is happening, and the king is like, or the Pope is like putting down his foot like, by God, this is the church. This is the king of the universe. Christ is the king of the universe. This is what we're going to celebrate. Ha. So, last Sunday of the year, it's kind of a king's, Pope's temper tantrum, if you will. But I think it's okay to ask ourselves the question, what's the meaning behind that? Really, if you take apart the language and you dismantle the sexism that's innate in it, what's the meaning behind it? And I think it has a pretty significant meaning for the end of the liturgical years. I think if we were trying to give it expression in our day and time, we might call this the feast of the honor of God of all creation, right? What was trying, or maybe it's the feast of all creation. Ultimately, what I think was trying to happen, I think the Pope, outside of his own temper tantrum, I really think that Pope was trying to get us to realize that the God in which we believe, the God of our understanding, is a God who's over all of this. You know? Now, at that point, the only thing they had was king, right? What made everything over all of it was king. So they used that. But it's not so much the word as it is the concept. Is the God that we believe in, a God who's so vast, and is why I used the universe picture in the newsletter this week. It's a God who, we believe in a God who covers all of that, right? All of that universe. It's a reminder, I think, for us this last Sunday of the year that we really believe in a God who is so big we can't hardly conceive of it. I'm just going to ask you to hold that for a second. In the aftermath of the Nigerian Civil War in December of 1971, there was in Nigeria there was a massive healthcare crisis. People were dying everywhere. There was a group of French doctors who said, "We cannot let this happen in our world." 1971. So they got together themselves, and they got nurses to help them, and they got technicians to help them, and they formed an organization, and you've probably heard of it. It's called Doctors Without Borders. And they went to Nigeria, and they started to help the people of Nigeria. They brought injections and vaccinations, and they transformed the country, literally saved it from the brink of destruction. That for Doctors Without Borders, in their mission, they say there is no place for race, creed, immigration status, sexual orientation, or anything other than the presence of intense physical, mental, and emotional suffering that could benefit from practitioners of health and wholeness. In other words, they'll go anywhere, right? And they'll go anywhere there is human suffering to alleviate that suffering to the max. I'm going to ask you to hold on to that for a little bit. Hold on to that thought. You may not have known this, but for the first several decades of the church, we were not known as Christians. We were known as the people of the way. The people of the way. It was much more about the way of life than it was about a set of doctrines and beliefs. It was much more about how people lived rather than what people believed. So we were called the people of the way. It wasn't so much about those belief statements. It was definitely much more about the way we lived. The way that people lived in the day of Jesus was so unique that they welcomed everybody. That was way outside of the bounds of almost every faith tradition, including Jesus' own, the Jewish faith tradition, right? These people didn't make sense to the norm because they welcomed anybody and everybody, the Gentile and the Jew. Remember, Scripture even says there's no Jew or Greek or slave or free, right? We're all one. That was a phenomenal shift in the religious tradition. But unfortunately, over the years, what happened is Christianity lost that fundamental understanding of who it was to be a bearer of the truth, right? Jesus nailed it. To be a bearer of the witness to the truth. For so many complex and complicated reasons and developments, somehow Christianity decided that our faith was more a specific set of tenets and beliefs rather than a way of life. Can you see it? You know what I mean? We decided that here's the doctrine and here's the dogma, and we laid it all out, and that's what we have to do. That's what we have to follow. Rather than being a faith belief or an understanding of a God who's a God of love and compassion and mercy and forgiveness and liberation and hope. In many ways, the church morphed into, if you will, a tribal mindset and tribal behaviors. We had those who were in and those who were out, right? We called them excommunicated, right? We kicked them out. So we had those who were in, we had those who were saved and those who were not saved, and we had those who believed and those who don't believe. All of a sudden we came up with all these categories, and we excluded people, and we included only those people who somehow looked like us and prayed like us and acted like us and danced like us and all of that. So if you looked like that, you were in. If you didn't, you were out. Isn't that exactly the opposite or exactly the people whom Jesus so adamantly preached against, right? You're in and you're out. No, Jesus said that's not what this is about. Somehow we misinterpreted the word Catholic. It doesn't necessarily mean universal, which we often refer to it. The truest meaning of the word Catholic is all-embracing, all-inclusive. Tribalism sets arbitrary boundaries, right? And divides people. In short, it creates communities of people who look like us and talk like us and act like us and eat and pray and think and dance like us. But if we go back to the Beatitudes, which we just heard at the beginning of last month, the Beatitudes celebrate the fact that holiness resides in the poor, that holiness resides in the sorrowing, that it resides in those who are peacemakers, and it resides in the humble and the merciful and those who are willing to be prophets to call us back to holiness. That, my friends, is messy. It's not clean, right? It's not clean lines of division and categories of certainty. They just don't happen in that. It's messy when you're a prophet and when you're poor and when you're sorrowing and you're a peacemaker and you're humble and you're merciful. I think the better description of truly being Catholic would be something like this. Like, here comes everyone. Open the gates, right? Or maybe because of this season of the year, maybe the more accurate description might be, welcome to the land of misfit toys, right? Welcome to the land of misfit toys. You see, my friends, tribalism helps us to seem like we're safe and to believe that we're secure and comfortable. But there's also a blind side, a little secret, if you will, a dark side. Tribalism leads us to hate and to fear and to irrational and illogical discourse and divisive thoughts and actions. As people of the way, our God is a God of all people, over all and in all and through all, even in those whom we may be rejecting or judging or excluding or deporting or prosecuting. Perhaps this special Sunday, this last Sunday of the year, is here to remind us that we have to think of our faith as Christianity without borders, right? As Christianity much like the Doctors Without Borders, because that is and would be exactly what it means to be Catholic. So, my friends, I say to us today, and I hope to say it into the future, welcome to the land of misfit toys.